It's hard to gorge on mints. I worked in Nestle for chocolate confections and there were pounds and pounds of stuff there on everything. Good stuff.
Okay, it is 3 o'clock. So, and we have you tested to make sure people are hearing us? And
Lynn, I'll test you because I can see you. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Ted was breaking up quite a bit.
oh, I wasn't talking very loudly.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's better just now.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I think we're ready when you are.
Okay, so it is now 3:02, and I will call the meeting to order. Want to go around the room first and do the introductions. Ted Fedora, Chair, Aesthetics Committee.
Lucy Crown, City of Asheville Transportation.
Mark Biggerstaff, Assistant Division Construction Engineer, NCDOT.
Ashley Hare, City of Asheville Transportation Department.
David Hazard, Urban Designer, City of Asheville Plumbing Department. Dave Moyer, Michael Wright, Presentability. David O'Connor, French Powder Run PF.
David Dixon, citizen living application.
Tom Beasy, Resident Engineer, Asheville Construction, NCDOT.
Okay, and online, I see joining us, we have Mike, we have Lynn, Nicole, and we also have Michael Rogers, and 7 others who I assume are
I can give
NCDOT
the name.
people.
There's Danielle Bagley, Greg Hall, Malcolm Watson, Micah Rogers, Nathan Moneyham, Olivia, Solomon Mangasha, and Taba, NCDOT. There might be a conference room, like.
Okay. Okay, so want to welcome everybody. And the first item on the agenda is the consent agenda, which consists of the minutes of the June 12th meeting, which have been updated and distributed to the committee members today. And the agenda for today, which has also been updated and distributed. And so any changes to either of those 2 documents? Hearing none, call for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Okay,
Second.
okay. And I will call the roll for the vote. Mike?
I wasn't there, so I can't vote on that.
Okay. Lynn?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
And myself is yes, so that is approved. Opening the public comment period. Anyone wishing to make a public comment at this time is welcome to. Otherwise, I will keep the public comment period open for participation of members of the public. Yes.
Two quick ones.
Mhm.
One thing I've been worried about there, the current design doesn't have bus stops in it, and there's 11 of them in the area between. And maybe nothing on the ones on the north, they're against the sidewalks, it may not be a big deal. The ones on the MUP, however, may require changes or realignments. I'm not sure what the impacts of shelters are, but if they're not in the project yet, now might be the time to at least plunk them in there to see whether there's any impacts.
Yeah, let me briefly address that. Many of those, of course, are outside of the project area.
Well, I was just counting between Bound Bridge and Florida.
Okay.
So I was
Right. We had attempted to address bus stops earlier in the project, and it required coordination with ART, and we were never able to achieve that coordination. So with respect to any design of the bus stops will be standard bus stops that.
I believe that Burton Street had negotiated with NCDOT to install a bus stop on Patton in that area, and also on Haywood, and they would have to meet the NCDOT standards, which are significantly greater than the city of Asheville's.
Yeah, and that's part of the Burton Street mitigation, which is a parallel track to the work that the committee is doing. But yeah, thanks, Mike, for that information.
I think the issue is if you have to place a bus shelter between the MUP and the curb, you may find yourself bending the MUP back, and that might have issues. I don't know. The issue is plunk one in there and see if it has an impact that might affect it at the 25% design level. A bus stop on a sidewalk, probably nothing, but it's worth looking at. You don't have to know where they are. Just, there's I guess 5, 6 on one side, 5 on the other, and it may require rework later. And as a project manager, I hate rework.
Right.
So,
Okay. I think that's something for NCDOT and Archer Wright to note and to coordinate with Art on that.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone knows. I don't know that much about the transit groups, so I didn't go any further detail. Yeah. And the second comment was the between I-26 bridge over Patton and the jet-bound bridge. From what I can tell from the documents, there wasn't a lot of streetscape ideas in that section. Of course, all the cool streetscape stuff was east of jet-bound bridge. But now that we've got this bridge here, if you were to say, let's take a look at the sense of approach into Asheville, now that we're under the bridge, it's behind us, right?
Yeah.
So it may affect things at this level. I'm thinking rough grading. It may affect to try to get the view shed going up the Bound Bridge to not be so detrimental. Later on, it might affect signage and lighting. Later on, it might affect the thinness of gantries for highway signs, or the lighting that, we want to upgrade maybe the light fixture, all with a sense of improving the experience getting into Asheville, which is a huge deal.
Right. I think those things have been addressed, though. We do recommend street trees, and that would apply to the all the way from the Bowen Bridge to the end of the project. And we do also we have the I think it's Mitchell lighting, if I'm remembering correctly, that along the MUP, which is what the Greenways Commission had requested. We made the decision east of the Bowen Bridge, and I think the same logic would apply west of the Bowen Bridge, not to have any not to have any special treatment for the sidewalks, in recognition that when development takes place, those sidewalks are, by city ordinance, are going to be expanded to 10 feet, 10-foot sidewalks. And if we had any treatment on the sidewalks, they would just be torn up and when development took place and have to be redone. So we chose not to have any sidewalk treatment. So that's sort of the streetscaping decisions, and I think they apply.
Well, you said we recommended, part of my concern is
Mhm.
even though the aesthetic committee recommended it in 2023, how much remains in the project is a big question.
All those things.
Everything I've looked, it's not in
Yeah.
there, so.
All those things were either, they were adopted by city council, funded, either, those things which required NCDOT,
Mhm.
involvement were funded. Those things which would be installed after the fact by the city, that is up to the city, but those, they have adopted those recommendations, so we have to,
Well, I guess
We have to
the
trust.
warning is when the warning is when I've looked into the detailed documents and I don't get my hands on ain't there. So, and then you have to look at which ones might be an issue.
One of the things that might be an issue for streetscape is the city and NCDOT has agreed to do the three entry monuments. They're now between the I-26 overpass, unfortunately, and the Bowen Bridge, the entrance into the city. So we may need to look at those again, so that because now you're going to be coming out of the bridge and seeing those three structures. And what is the separation between the exiting of the underpass and seeing the three major structures entering the bridge?
Yeah, I think there's quite a bit of distance there.
Okay.
I think you've got about 1,200 feet to play to look at improving the view as you come into the city before you hit the Bowen Bridge.
Well, we have three monuments there that will be
Right.
installed.
Yeah.
So that needs to be reviewed. And I wasn't sure on the final, were those are to be lit up, correct?
Yes.
Both internally and externally.
Yeah. I think internally.
And those monuments are a city project. They're not a
No.
Richard Wright project.
No, there's.
No. They are.
They were taken out
Right.
in the O&R.
What?
The big monuments is one of the elements that came out in the O&R, I believe.
They're not. They're still in the project.
Still in there? Okay. I misread that then.
Okay, good.
David,
Yeah,
what is it that makes you think that they were taken out during the O&R?
I'd have
Because
to-
I've never seen a complete list of what was taken out during O&R, and so I was just curious as to where you were getting that information.
well, that's interesting. That's a good point. The O&R is, I've never gotten of the O&R what was accepted.
Right.
I never got the sort of close the loop. It was proposed in the O&R. Evidently, it was rejected, according to Nathan. So that's where my gap is. I don't know what
Okay.
of the O&R was actually done. Now, in the base proposal, there's a great system where they say what was proposed on the ATCs and what was accepted, what was approved. That's all well documented. But I have not been able to put my hands on of the O&R what was accepted or not.
Everything that the aesthetics committee recommended, that is the responsibility of NCDOT and has been funded by the city, that cannot be touched.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, can Archer Wright and DOT staff confirm that they cannot be touched? I mean, I hear you saying that, but
Well, that's
Are
what
they saying
that's what NCDOT said.
Is
And
that what
with all
you're
due
saying?
respect,
I'm saying I meet the requirements of the contract I have with you.
does the contract specify that those items can't be touched? Which items can't be touched in the contract? Because we weren't aware that there was any specificity in the contract about which things couldn't be touched, the way you're suggesting, Ted.
The aesthetics committee report was not a contract document. It was not included as a bid.
What's
I'll let-
John, for clarification, what What is covered is the what makes those things enforceable is the municipal agreement between DOT and the city, which has attached funding supplied by the city. So when we went through O&R and we evaluated those things to reduce the scope and risk and the cost to get it to where we can move forward with the project, we didn't look at those things that were already funded by a separate source, which is what Ted is referring to. And those are in the municipal agreement with the city, between DOT and the city. As far as a list of documents, I know the MPO has a document that was prepared that we made, that it's on our website now, that kind of outlines some of the changes from 2018 until now, and both through procurement and some of the changes for procurement, and then a list of the changes in O&R. There's a lot of changes that really don't show up in O&R, that from O&R that don't really show up in plan changes. They're material things, they're risk things. We can share that with the committee. It's publicly available on our website. I'll send Ted a link of what that list looks like. To your point, David, I think some of the stuff you're not seeing, and you talk about placemaking, it's just a lot of that stuff just doesn't show up on the level of plans that we have currently, if that's where you're looking. Will come later. A lot of them are going to come with the landscape contract that will follow behind this as well.
I was just looking for things that need to be highlighted that might affect the 25% design level. Rough grading is one. You know, if you lower something, your view is better. You know, sign gantries, there are pretty ones and there are ugly ones. That can be done later. My experience comes from driving into Patton to the Jeff Bound Bridge, and if you do that and pay attention, it's not very pleasant looking because of all the fences and junk and signage, and it's very, very cluttered, right? And there's a whole lot of topo that kind of hides views. You really can't tell what's going to happen after rough grading is done on this project. So it's just that the design committee, the old one, had done such a great streetscape job east of Bowen, but there's really not much west of Bowen, and I didn't know whether any of that could be reactivated.
I guess just maybe from my understanding, when you what different do you see east of the Bowen Bridges?
Well, there's so much artwork and rendering and artist graphics and all this stuff. I mean, I've done a lot of streetscape projects, and it's all there east of the Bowen Bridge in the design committee reports for the old group. But there's really not much west of the Bowen Bridge. And I think I heard once that sense of entrance into Asheville was going to start at the west edge of the Bowen Bridge, which is an approach. But it seems like now that we've got this group organized looking, it would be good to continue to look east just a little bit and see if there's anything that should be discussed at this level of design, because it'll be a lot more expensive later.
Yeah, east or west?
West, looking, traveling east.
I think the reason is because when we were working on this project, that project
Right, it wasn't
still underneath.
That's right.
And so
Big
we,
changes.
going into a commercial district,
Yeah.
there wasn't, a pretty rough commercial district. There wasn't a whole lot of focus on what you're going to see going west because of what you're going right into. The concentration was going into the downtown area and the vista and the experience of coming into downtown Asheville. So that's, I think that's.
Well, that is what I misspoke.
But
I
you
don't
made a
care so
point,
much
and that
about
is that now
west.
we've got a different kind of
Yeah.
design, and it may be worth taking a look, another look at what opportunities there may be west of the bridge.
Yeah, it wouldn't be much. I mean, I'm not proposing spending Nathan's contingency money yet.
Please don't.
But I might be.
It's already.
Well, I think there's a point to be made too. A lot of what you're talking about, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the things you're talking about when it comes to generally the pavement of Patton is the same elevation as it is now. If you look at the maps, that's generally just resurfacing. That's not changing. There's a median, there's the greenways, all of that space, meaning or from a design level now, it's a very general, the slopes coming down from the field and all that stuff. The the scaping of that, or the streetscaping elements of those areas, are what would fall into the landscape contract, which is where we've committed that 1.5%. That's basically $11 million. And that contract will be developed and then and begin construction at the completion of the main construction project. And that's, to Ted's point, that's the planting of trees and the bushes, and then can include some of the river rock stuff that's been talked about in the past. All of that will come later, and won't be necessarily part of Archer Wright's contract.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was thinking that there was a fair amount of earthwork and rough grading because of the I-26 bridge. Right, Nathan, you clarified that Patton and all those, the hills and the slopes and the grit, they're going to be pretty much the way they are now.
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
Most of the grading will be the ramp. So change you.
Or
Go under and have ramps. Separate.
yeah, there's a lot of rough grading around the on-ramps, the extra. I mean, there's a lot of rough grading. It's not just not that that's going to change. So it seems like taking a look at how those roads come down on the east side of the I-26 bridge, the off ramps and the on ramps, if that's what they're called. It seems like there is an opportunity to improve the view as you go towards the city. That's the point I'm raising. Now's the time to think about making the experience of driving into town better, because this is the group to do it.
Right, right.
Well, not yet. I'm still working on it.
Yeah. A couple of points. One is that any graphics of East Patton Avenue were like, they were not like, they were just more sort of planning type examples, not any definition of what should occur. What should occur, as I said, planting of street trees, there was some median treatments. There's some median treatments west of the Bone Bridge as well. And there are also street trees west of the Bone Bridge, and the MUP lighting west of the Bone Bridge. So I think it is fairly comparable. Now, if you're talking about regrading Patton Avenue,
No, I'm talking about rough grading in the area of the off ramp and the on ramp there on the screen. That's very helpful. That's gorgeous if you look at the screen.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Doesn't have highway signs, doesn't have highway
Right,
gantries,
right,
doesn't
yeah.
have the street lights,
Yeah.
doesn't have the, well, in other words, 80% of what's ugly ain't there.
Yeah.
And now's the time to make it not ugly.
Right, right. We also addressed extensively the undergrounding of utilities, which,
That's wonderful.
was, and the answer we pretty much got was that is not going to happen, although the recommendation remains. And, if it can be worked out with Duke to do that, and, no or not much cost.
Okay, so once again, overhead wires and things that detract from the
Yeah.
experience ain't there.
Right,
And,
right.
and there
But
is
that-
no way for
Yeah.
anybody to really look at what's going to happen.
Yeah.
In 5 years.
I assume they will be there because I assume they're not going to be underground utilities. So
Actually,
yeah,
it's
we
expensive.
fought that battle.
No, the point is visually right there.
Yeah.
That's clean.
Yeah.
But 5 years from now, it's going to be pretty cluttered and not real pleasant to drive through unless we get started on it now and ask some detailed questions.
Well, that's part of this is a two-phased, you may be aware of this, but this is basically a two-phased project on the part of the aesthetics committee. That is, the second phase is going to be, we've already gone through the vertical portion of it. Second phase is going to be the horizontal, basically the landscaping and some of the other stuff that I think you're right.
Where would you put a thinner, elegant sign gantry that's provided by the DOT in the contract versus a regular one? Where can you change where the highway signs directing on ramp and off ramp? Where would you talk about striping, laning, anything? That's
It
all.
seems like the signage gantry was discussed several years ago,
Hmm.
going through more of a simple tubular gantry. It was decided to stick with the space frame standard style instead, but that was looked at.
So the more aesthetic was recommended and rejected. That's kind of what I'm seeing.
But by the committee, that style was chosen by the committee, the
So,
space frame as opposed to the steel tubular. It was the committee's decision.
okay.
Yeah.
Is there
we
merit?
can-
Is there merit in trying to improve the experience of the driver or the bicyclist or the pedestrian as they leave the I-26 bridge and get to the jet bound bridge? If there's no
There-
merit in trying to improve it, I don't have to worry about it.
there is merit.
Mhm.
However, what I would propose is that, first of all, much of that will be part of the landscape
Landscaping and
design
view quite a lot.
plan, which the city is going to, put together, under the direction of the organizing principles that the, committee has approved. And, we can, if we have time, we can talk about other suggestions, but, we are not in a position of spending large amounts of money.
Right. No, a streetscape project is
Yeah.
not a cheap and easy
Yeah.
project.
Yeah.
Uh,
And as I said, streetscaping, we have, streetscaping is in there and it essentially matches the streetscaping that we have east of the, Bone
Okay.
Bridge. So I think, we don't have to readdress that.
Ted, I would agree if this area west of the Bowen Bridge has really changed. Is there a possibility that we could do a meeting and talk about can we change the gantries? Can we what can we do? What's possible at this point? Whether, for instance, the MUPs are completely straight, or whether there's a wave in them to give a more natural trail feel to them. What is available in the space that we have?
Right, right.
Are we, and also, is the city still considering having commercial buildings between the now the overpass and the Bowen Bridge, or is that area going to just be a green space?
That's to be determined, and we have that on the agenda for later in the meeting.
Okay.
And in terms of any further discussion of improving the improvements between the new bridge and the Bowen Bridge, I want to table that when and if we have time before the charge of this committee runs out. But if we do have time, we'll address it.
Great. Thank you.
I have one quick question.
Yes.
This is primarily for Nathan. Nathan, going back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, is there some mechanism in place, whether it's NCDOT, the contractor, the city, whatever, to actually cross-check the recommendations of the aesthetic committee as reflected in the final report with the plans as they go through the 25%, 50%, 65% plans? I mean, is there a tracking mechanism in place to make sure that the recommendations that the city is paying for and that you've accepted are actually reflected in the plans?
Yes, there is, and that's really done through each plan submittal, both aesthetically, and we've got just a compliance almost type review that we will go through not only with our folks at DOT that are checking plans, but also the city staff and their review, and that'll happen at each stage. Now, again, the level plans as they get brought together will, each piece will come in later. And I really do think a lot of there's a baseline element to, and I think somebody said it a second ago, there's somewhat two phases to this. The first is that to make sure that we get everything that's incorporated into the hardline construction of the road. That's been committed to address, and that's what that is. But there are a lot of things that can be longer term conversations that can go into that landscape contract that can even continue on past, as Ted says, the initial kind of charge for the committee here to get these decisions made on things that affect structural design and right of way limits and those kind of things. Whereas the specific MUP route under the bridges and the landscape associated, and even some of the lighting from a standpoint of if the conduit's installed and future light, there's things that can continue in conversation past kind of the decision point we're at now, if that makes sense as well, including to what you're asking, that there's a plan check review from both the department and a city staff review where we're looking at these plans and confirming that they're in compliance with the commitments that were made in the municipal agreement and the funding that the city's providing.
Okay, thank you.
I just have
One more question on that. I'm sorry. Things like there's not to be any chain link fence in this project. We're using the goat fencing instead, and there's not to be silver guardrails. It's supposed to be the brown guardrails. Where and when would we be able to verify that those have been included?
So those are just material requirements in the municipal agreement and in the contract. I mean, and as far as how it shows up in a plan set, it doesn't really appear as a visualization or anything like that. It's just in a table of materials of what materials we are to use.
But we've never he's never seen that.
Nathan, if I can say, typically when we have aesthetic guidelines, we get an aesthetics package at some point during the plan stages. So the team will submit an aesthetic package that shows all the aesthetics that are going to be included in the project, so that we check and review to make sure that they meet up with what is required in the project. So there'll be a package that's turned in that shows the fence, that shows what's required. So we will have a package that's checked to make sure that we are meeting all the requirements.
And the aesthetics committee will be able to review that too.
We can make that available.
I think to the point, Mike, and we'll coordinate with the city staff and ultimately what direction they want to go. But as those submittals come in, and it may be something we can reconvene, because those kind of checkpoints will happen at different, as we go on with the design. We can work out how to do that with city staff to get the committee input as far as those checks go. I'm not sure how that will work right now, but we'll figure something out.
Yeah, that would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm not privy to that agreement between the city and I haven't seen it anyway, between the city and AJ. So there's a lot of gaps in what I'm seeing. But I would suggest that now at least there's a topic raised of improving the aesthetics between the I-26 bridge and the Jeff Ballin Bridge. I would also ask the group to extend the focus to the Ballin Bridge itself to see whether what was expected in 2023 report is going to be implemented either by the contract or by the city.
It will be.
I've seen cases that are significantly different. So I just would tell the group to focus on the Ballin Bridge also while you're reviewing what's going on.
I just had a couple of clarification questions about things that were just shared and then a comment. So I couldn't quite understand, Nathan, what you were saying about the aesthetics package and whether it would or would not be circulated to the people who are on the mailing list for the aesthetics committee, or just the members of the committee, or were you saying that the city would decide later if the package were shared? I just wanted you to clarify.
I mean, our charge in our agreement is with the city. And the review times that we have for some of these submittal turnarounds, we'll look to city staff to help us do that. The goal of the committee, and going back even to years prior, has been that all this work and the meetings that were done ahead of time to establish the guidelines were to set the framework that we would already have in place the committee's decisions that we're just checking against.
Right.
Unfortunately, the committee never got a chance to review the NCDOT's final guidelines to the bidders.
Well,
never
the city of the Sets Committee actually approved those guidelines that were given to the team.
The ones that were given to NCDOT, we approved. What NCDOT did finally, we never saw. We never saw the actual.
We didn't change it.
Okay. So you just forwarded exactly as it was.
The document that AECOM prepared that the committee approved.
Okay.
The guidelines that were given to the teams during procurement.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So, yeah, just, I think what we're hearing from multiple people is that there's interest in just being a part of the process for making sure that the recommendations that this group believes have been secured are actually present in the designs. And we all know with complicated projects, there are a lot of things that happen that someone needs to catch, and there's interest on the part of this group in being involved in that process. And it also sounds like if there's advocacy work to be done around that, it needs to be done by us communicating with city staff and with council members about our desire to be involved in that way. And I think there's good grounds for wanting that kind of engagement. We weren't engaged in the O&R process. You know, citizen activists, people who had been involved with the Asheville Design Center, people who were intimately familiar with this project, none of them were involved at that stage, at a stage when actually it would have been very helpful for them to be involved. And so I think we just need to be proactive also about requesting access, not just waiting to see if we get it or not. And then another thing I guess I wanted clarification on was whether or not this municipal agreement that's been mentioned that has the material requirements and the various recommendations of the committee that have been accepted, where is that municipal agreement? Is that something can be circulated to the members of this group? Who can speak to that?
Someone from the city, maybe.
I don't know. I'm sure it is something that can be circulated. I don't know where it lives.
Okay.
We'll look into it.
The
I've asked for
betterments
it,
that
never seen it.
council approved, we've got the minutes of the council meeting and the resolution. I just need to know the
Yeah,
date.
but there was an actual municipal agreement that was signed by the city and by NCDOT. It is a document. It's somewhere.
Yeah,
And
I don't know.
So,
absolutely, you'll find this out.
we wanted to make the formal request, wherever it is, whoever needs to rustle it up, can it be please sent to the members of this group? And then lastly,
Yeah.
I just want to remind everyone who's here that none of our boards and commissions are currently active in the city. And I heard reference earlier in the conversation made to comments by the Beanway Commission. You know, potentially we could be thinking about the Sustainability Commission. The Tree Commission is also not active. None of these groups are active right now. And that's part of what has channeled a lot of citizen-led organizing into these independent groups and has made them, frankly, less effective, and it requires more work on our part to do the same thing. I have been not only a member, but chair of a city commission, and I can tell you that the commissions have done a lot of good work on the part of the city. And the fact that none of them are currently active is actually a problem in this kind of a situation, because there isn't that extra level of review, but not even just that extra level of review, that extra opportunity for also public engagement. And so it's a different context that we're in now. And I think we need to think about that when we think about what the process will be going forward for receiving comment, for receiving feedback outside of whenever it's deemed appropriate to convene the aesthetics committee.
Thank you. Okay, so I received an email from Joe Manicosi, which I'm going to be entering the email into the record, and it will be attached to the minutes. So I'm not going to read the entire email, but he sent some graphics, and Lucy, if you could pull that up. He sent some graphics of a bridge design that had been proposed by Archer Wright at some point in the process, suggested that that might be interesting to review. And he says it's basically a laser cut scrim in front of the beams. And so I wanted to pull that up, have the committee take a look at it, have NCDOT and Archer Wright react to it and see whether that is something that is a potential without too much cost.
Hold on, because I had
Mark's got
Jessica's thing, so,
Mark's got
okay,
it
good,
here.
okay.
To clarify, those pictures were in the Archer Wright joint venture proposal under the documents that were describing ATC 4, which is the big one, which is the flip of the, that's where they were. There's about 30 pages around ATC 4, and this is one of them.
Okay.
Ted, my question on this is, I
Yeah.
didn't understand exactly what, I mean, I think I understand what laser cut is, but I'm not sure if I understand what a scrim is.
I'm
Is that
not sure.
chiseling into
I was
concrete?
surprised.
Is that chiseling
I have
into
no idea.
concrete? Are you familiar with that?
No.
I'm on the same sheet of music you are on the terminology.
Yeah, right, yeah.
If I would interpret it the same way as we had the unofficial discussion.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's laser cut metal that is,
Laser cut metal.
that's,
That
It looks
if
like
I
it.
was to build it, that's how I would do it.
You blow it up a little bit for us.
So the intent there was, and how our AJ designed it, I can't speak to, I wasn't involved with the process at that time, but as intricate as that is, that would have to be CNC laser cut.
Mhm.
And it would be, I would do it out of some kind of, aluminum, maybe.
Okay.
And then it would be bolted to the exterior girder or hung in some form of fashion.
Okay, so almost like a skirt, a design skirt. Yeah, right, okay.
So would that change anything about the basic kind of structure behind it that we've been discussing in order to do something like that, assuming that the city wanted to do that?
The simple answer is no, if we're only talking about that, what I'm calling the metal work. There's a lot of elements in that rendering right there.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing, I mean, obviously, we wouldn't necessarily be adapting this design exactly, but looking at the whole thing, what is it that we would need to do structurally in order to make it possible to have something that looked like that?
Those cheap walls are custom.
Cheap balls
Yeah.
are the ones going down to the.
Yeah,
left.
where you have that medallion, I'll call it, on the left, right? You're already proposing form liner on that exterior wall right there, right? So that's, I think you're already addressing that.
So it's more like
Bolting that
walls.
metal to the girder is, if it was done the way I'm describing, would not have a big structural impact.
Yeah, we're not talking about doing anything in the girder yet. This is a new idea. We're only talking about the,
I love it. Yeah. I pick up on this.
well, it's now we're showing it, so it is gonna want it. But,
Well, I guess, again, I was not involved with the process, so I don't know who evaluated it and why it didn't make it into what our current aesthetic package will look like. So, but I think that's why we're here. So I'll defer back to DOT.
So there's two elements here. There's the concrete barrier that's at the top that we can do something with. And then this is, in addition to that, a skirt hanging below that in the girder.
Mhm.
It would be made of, in this case, metal.
You may want to take that into account based on the form liner that you're choosing, because they may conflict,
right,
or
exactly,
not
right,
complement
yeah,
each other. I'm not an aesthetics guy, but I'm learning the lingo.
It should be a full design.
I really like this idea. But I think we need to look at what the costs were that you were going to be looking up on the form liners, and if any of our previous choices were even something that would be affordable, or if we have to move away from that altogether. And then this becomes even more attractive as an option, possibly.
I will say that for this particular, and this is something I've just learned today, and we'll have to look into some more. I think Greg Hall was on the call, has some information, but the person, this particular layout, I guess, or type of aesthetic treatment has been patented. So, we'll have to dig into that. Greg, can you help me out a little bit?
I don't think we need to replicate the same design. It's just the
I-
concept of using this scrim application.
I don't know that it's the design. Greg, help me out, Greg.
It's not the design, it's the concept. Has been patented by a lady named Vicky Scurry in Virginia. And she came up with the idea, she filed a patent for it. And when she discovered this project that's being shown on the screen right now, there was some disagreement about the department doing this project without her being involved.
Okay,
Not saying we can't do it, just saying that we'll have to do some additional research, I guess, and determine what her involvement would have to be if that's the path that you all would choose to or want to look at going down.
okay. Well,
And that panel, just, I heard a discussion about it. That, if I'm remembering correctly, it's a stainless steel panel that's showing right now. It's not aluminum.
That makes sense.
Well, would it make sense to go over the prices that were, I guess, obtained over this past week for the 5 or so examples we had selected?
right, let's move on to that, to the unfinished business. And, unless there are any updates that are not on the, that are not going to be addressed in the agenda, hearing none, we'll go to, have you received anything back, David, on the, pricing of those form liner options?
Yes, sir, I have, and I forwarded on to DOT, so Mark.
Yeah, I got it.
Mike, Mark, can address it.
And I was just gonna, I guess, go through what we have new and you can, which you've already, I guess, goes in one, but of the new stuff we have from last week are the pricing for the 5 form liners that y'all selected. We do have some concepts for under bridge MUP lighting that Greg put together that he can talk to in detail if we need to.
Okay, that's next on the agenda.
Okay, we have a rendering for the vertical abutment, that was asked for. So we do have pricing on these items, so we can talk through them. So that one is Western Range grass, I believe.
Mhm.
And what they provided is pricing for span B only, which is the middle span, just over patent, and then I've got pricing for all 3 spans. And it does include, I think all of these include a little bit extra concrete thickness. The pricing they provided does include that. He did find out, I guess, before we get into them, because there are some, I guess, stipulations with some of them that I'll hit on, but found out on the barrier wall, we can adjust the height. Really any, because it's a design standard tested barrier wall shape.
So 42 inches.
42 inches is what you got. Found out, and it's not a complication with any of these that you've chosen. 1.5 inches extra thickness is all we can do without, then you get into structural changes with the design of the bridge. But my understanding is these 5 are good from that aspect. So got pricing on them. I don't know if you want span B, just the total span ABC, or I can go through. And basically what I've done is I've taken their pricing for all 3 spans. I pulled out the 235,000 that the DOT had estimated for our standard with stain, and basically have a delta, which I think is an important number to y'all.
Yep.
Most likely.
Span B covers both, the extent of both the lanes.
Yeah, span B, you basically have bridge column on each side of patent. Span B is that section between those 2 columns. And I'll just start with ABC because that's the 235 reference.
Okay.
The Western Range grass is 283, 364 total. So that's a change. That's a $48,300 more than the standard.
That's just.
Can you just
for
put
the-
the-
Could you repeat
That's
that?
for all
please?
three.
$28,000.
That's for all three. $48,000 more.
48 or 28,
48.
48, okay.
That would be the city's obligation, are you saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Unless it's a Nathan's contingency stand.
The 235
Never
is
mind.
that.
Okay, all right.
That was the, yeah.
Yes, yeah, sorry. Couldn't help myself.
Arizona zigzag, that's 17947. That one, again, we're dealing with all three spans, so this is just complete switch out of this pattern instead of a standard for all three spans. It's $32,500 more for that pattern. And that is not with a stain on these patterns. I've got a separate number from that, but didn't know if y'all would go with a stain or not, so we've got it separate. 17951 California Art Deco. That one is $75,400 additional.
You have expensive taste, Ted.
Yeah,
What's this one called? California what?
Art Deco.
California Art Deco. And I've got some cut sheets that the contractor pulled with these that are a little more detailed than this. I can send over to you. Buttress swirl. That one, the additional cost is $34,600. And I'm rounding some to make it easy. And that one is $74,400 more.
Could you repeat that?
74,400.
Does this one have a name?
Yes, Arizona, Santan.
Same thing.
So the 2, 3, 4, and 5, that's for all three spans, and the first one was just for span B?
All the numbers I've given are for all three spans currently.
Okay.
Just that's, I guess, worst case in my mind, dollar wise.
Mhm.
So we're looking at 32.5 to 74.4. Right.
Yes.
75 for.
75.4.
Yeah.
And we might want to walk back through them. There are some, I guess, things that the estimator pointed out due to some of the stuff we talked about before as far as the differing heights of the panels and how they would fit on the wall. And now that we know we can't make the wall taller, there are some how it actually looks aspects on a 42-inch wall that you might want to consider. Yeah, with this, well, you got buttress up. I can hit on it. That was only 24 inches, so that was the one you talked about as far as either have a narrow strip of it or that's a price for one set of panels. So if you start adding a set to do stack like some we're talking about last week or anything else, that price would grow, but that's one set of those panels replacing what we had. But other than that, there's really no complications with that one. The grass one, he really had no comments on it. It's just noted that it's 36 inches tall. So that's a situation where you're going to position it somewhere on that rail and you're going to have smooth surface top and bottom. And that similar with that one, that was just 20 inches tall. So what's priced is one set of those, one zigzag pattern on the round. And hit the Art Deco one. That one's 48 inches tall, so I think we talked about some last time. You're gonna have to cut something off. So does that impact the pattern and wear is a consideration with that? I believe that's only one of the 5 that would have to be cut down.
And then the last
And
one.
then the last one.
Talk on that.
The last one, why is that one more than some of the other ones? Is there, what is the thinking behind the cost, or what is attributes to the cost?
And Dave can answer that probably better than me, but I assume it's just the cost of that particular form liner itself and then coupled with extra concrete.
Some of these that were chosen, and I don't have the notes in front of me, and my assumption is this is a single-use form, so you have to buy a lot more form to implement that pattern for the length that we're talking about. Some of these other patterns we get reuse out of them, so they can be set in the form as we progress pouring the concrete. So there's a number of nuances here that we could get into more detail, but I would suggest if you select a specific pattern, we can go into the details of the why, what's driving the cost.
Okay.
But each one has a little bit different nuance along those lines. But the biggest cost driver is whether it's a single use or we can get multiple reuses out of the same form in some form.
Okay. I think this pattern here, the Arizona satin, is a really strong looking pattern. It's clean, it's simple, it's I think it will age well.
I think that's a really important point, Mike, is how it's going to look 10 years from now. Is it going to look dated, or does it have a timeless kind of quality to it?
And I think all of these costs, even though there's variation, I think they're well within the money that we have to allocate for these. So I don't think cost should be the determining factor here.
And Arizona is the only one that by itself in there, correct? Right.
Yeah. You wouldn't have any reveal top or bottom.
Right.
That was a 42 inch tall panel.
Set it right in.
There is a real life view of that one, the Arizona one, I think in the Fitzgerald catalog, that shows you more of a span view rather than just this little cut sheet view.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I think those of us who have looked at the catalog have seen that. I would echo, I would side with Mike on this, that of the patterns, I think this might be our best choice.
Yeah, I just wish we had something that was a little bit more indicative of the city, but
Yeah.
choices we have, we may just not be able to do that this time.
Well, what was the anticipated budget for this feature, Ted? You're saying that it's within range, but what is it?
Well, we have $400,000 to spend, that's reallocated from money that's saved from things that are not going to happen because of design changes east of the bridge, and which the committee has reviewed and given approval to. And this is definitely one of the major elements that that we're recommending in terms of cost.
So there's no specifics around that exactly. No. It's just that there is that money to use toward this project, and this is an important element of it. I'm just wondering, when we started the conversation, at that point, we were still talking about potentially a custom design of some kind. And then, you know, we also had a conversation about, oh, well, the form liners that are already out there are probably cheaper and maybe something's out there. But, you know, if they're going to be single use anyway, and, you know, potentially there could be like a central component or something that was actually custom, you know, perhaps that might be even better than choosing the $74,000 option if the funds are there and this is such a central component of the aesthetics of the project.
Technically, that might be the case. From a practical standpoint, we don't really have the time to design a custom.
Okay, I hear that, Ted. Do we have the time? I'm asking, would there be a possibility? I asked, specifically after our last meeting, I asked Councilmember Allman, and she passed the message along to city staff. Are going to be any people involved in this process who have some expertise with public art and design? And so I know that might be reserved for some other part of the meeting where city staff are apparently going to give feedback on that. But I just wonder if there are opportunities here now that if we seize on them quickly and we moved with swiftness, that we could actually end up with something a whole lot better than this. And so I understand that you're saying, Ted, that you don't feel like there's the time, but I guess I would love to hear from other people who have some sense of what the timeline is and whether that would be possible or not. Or if you wanted to say, well, we would need to get a final decision about what was going to be used and how much it was going to cost. We would need to have that by the end of July, or, you know, whatever that deadline was.
I'll ask another question, I guess. So
The guy in the back row.
when we've done this in the past, so like the 1.5 inch reveal is something that we cannot change. So we know the wall size, we know the spans that we're looking at, and we know we can't exceed 1.5 inch reveal.
And you can't have height.
Right, so none of that can change, but from the perspective of, to her point, yes, we want to finalize, but there could be a decline, but it won't affect. Yeah, you might come back with a custom panel in 3 months and say that's $500,000, that's out of budget. But
we could still go with some prefab at that point anyway.
sure.
I'm going to ask Nathan to address that.
I don't mind addressing
Or-
it.
Okay.
The last comments were correct. You have very specific parameters. This is a highway designed wall, right, for traffic. That's what's dictating we can't go over 1.5 inches and we can't add height. As long as you meet that criteria and you want to come up with a custom design, we can price that. I'm not coming up with a custom design. You need to provide that, right? So that would not change the bridge design, and that's not something that I need to know today.
So when, like, just ballpark, kind of, when would you actually need to know exactly which form liner was going to be ordered?
Look in the schedule. You have
So, months away. Yeah.
I guess a lot of it depends on how long it takes to actually make.
Well, yeah, when you say custom, that it gets scary. Right? Yeah,
Sure.
you know, it might take,
Understood.
to this gentleman's point, I'm sorry, no name, but yeah, you could come up with a design that may take 6 or 9 months to be, you know,
That wouldn't be practical,
put
right?
together. Well,
Yeah.
I could, you know, it's, you're not ahead, you need to make some decisions faster, but, you know, I never check. I'll say, when are we actually pouring these spans? It could be 3 years from now.
Right.
So stay within those parameters. If you want to design something custom, bring me the design. We can have it priced out and tell you how long it's going to take to implement it. Yeah, that's a possibility.
And there's no other details besides the depth of the trees and the actual height, such as additional weight or anything from a custom design.
Well, this is what scares me with the customer,
Right.
right? Yeah, you're talking about some, you know, 1/2 inch thick steel, stamp, decorative panels you want to bolt on that wall. That's a different, you can go out. We're talking let's make this specific to a custom form line.
Exactly.
Okay. You're sticking with a form liner that I can put in the form that doesn't have greater than 1.5 inches reveal, and we're not changing the height of the wall.
But to Lucy's point, only thing we need to pay attention to in the area of a custom form liner is the 1.5 inch reveal and the height of the overall design. That's it.
Those are fixed parameters.
Sorry, I know Ted threw it to me. I couldn't comment a second ago, but I think y'all got to where I would have said, which is if a custom is something that the committee wants to pursue, it is one of those things that as long as we can give you some fixed parameter things about depth and height that you can continue to work on something moving forward.
So I have a question. It goes back to when we were discussing the scrim idea. Now, the picture that Joe sent us, the scrim was on the girder, I guess. And we're talking about this being on the safety wall, the parapet. Could we not have a form liner, but instead use a scrim concept on that same location instead of on the girder, and have it framed in somewhat, like have an inset area, slightly inset, not exceeding that 1.5 inch depth, but use the scrim as an application instead of a form liner?
I guess going back to what he was talking about, it's more structural. When you start having to embed some kind of something steel in the walls, so you have to start looking at how that affects versus just a form liner with an 1.5 inch weight, and how that would affect that.
Seems like we'd be looking at a relatively light thing. It doesn't have to be a heavy gauge steel, I wouldn't think. Just a thought.
I know what you.
Yeah, you're waiting to answer. You're trying to figure out how to answer.
I'm not gonna answer. Can it be proposed? Sure. If you want me to comment as, if you want to hear my opinion, since we're limited to 1.5 inches, I don't know you're gonna get the depth reveal in front of some type of stamped metal panel would be an aesthetic concern I would have personally with what you're proposing. Can it be done? Yeah, I believe so. Right. So.
And if we were to come up with an alternative to the form liner, do we still have a $235,000 allocation for whatever we come up with?
That's a question for DOT. That's a question.
And Nathan can correct me if I'm wrong, but I would think yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll confirm that with our leadership, but the general tenet and the conversation that we've had with them as we had to lead up to these meetings and throughout has been as we identify those things and the money attached to the DOT standard, the thing we would pay for, that money is there. As long as it's spent on the rail, it can go to whatever treatment ends up being put on the rail. What we can't do is move it from the rail to some other, area of the project.
And one final question, do you think if we were to use the scrim idea on the parapet wall, the safety rail wall, instead of the girder, is it still under that copyright of the Virginia lady?
I don't know that we have any lawyers on here that can answer that question.
I think that's something we can investigate for next week. I mean, if that level of, I think we can pull some information together for next week about that specific method. And it, in that realm, it may not be that doesn't mean you can't use it. It may just, you have to source it from a certain place. But we can dig into that for the next meeting internally based off the history of that other project.
Just one thought, Lynn, and I apologize, on an embed, into that concrete rail may not have the durability. Embeds sometimes tend to shake or loose or curl. Dirt gets behind them over the years. An 1.5 inch thick piece of concrete, which you'll get from the form liner, if you hydroblast that every 10 years, it tends to look pretty good. I would be really nervous, especially about if somewhat thin, if it's stainless and beautifully edged. I would be very careful about putting an embed onto that rail. I don't know if you have an opinion on that, but a form liner is a pretty robust piece of concrete.
My only comment is you have to realize that that component of the bridge is constantly moving.
Mm-hmm.
A lot. Yeah. People don't realize how much it's at a minimum, it's vibrating 100% of the time.
I would just be cautious on
And
it.
it moves even greater than that.
So Ted, maybe for the purposes of what we're trying to do today, that we could just go forward with selecting one of these 5 designs and say, okay, if we go that route, this is the one that we would prefer.
Yeah, I was thinking that, but we have those 3 options now. There's, you know, selecting a off-the-shelf design, form liner design, doing a custom design, or doing the scrim. Lynn, in light of the comments that have just been made about durability and the sort of the vibration, et cetera, that bridge is going to take, does that change your opinion about?
Well, I think if it was verified that the vibration would deteriorate whatever product we use, yes. But I don't think that's verified at this point, and it was on the girders. Maybe the girders don't vibrate as much. I'm sure they don't, but and it seemed to work there.
That wasn't
So
a difference. That was just bolted on.
There's a big difference.
And I don't think it'll be an embed. I don't know that we're gonna embed anything in the concrete from just a design standard standpoint. A real important part, and that's why the reveal is important to have that concrete as a cover on the reinforcing steel that's inside that rail. We're all about protecting that. It's epoxy coated. We would not embed. It would be mounted off of the surface some distance.
And that's somewhat similar to the mounting on the.
Let me bring up cost impacts of this embed concept that we're talking about. The embed concept will still require hand forming. And the majority of the cost in the initial DOT component is hand forming. So that $235,000 number we gave you is still a component of what you're discussing now, because the majority of that is the labor that's involved with doing the hand forming instead of slip forming of the variable. So it's just not going to be an additive cost above and beyond the $235,000. So I think we're talking about a much more expensive concept here. If you can ask me questions if I didn't describe that correctly.
So the form liner is 235 plus 74 for all 3 spans?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't understand that as being the case. I thought we were talking about the 74. But it sounds like we're talking about 235 plus 70.
Yeah, the 74 is the city's budgetary component piece of that, since we're committed to 235, which is the cost of a standard form liner.
It is the delta.
Okay.
It is the
74
delta.
is
The total's 3 something.
Right. 74 is what goes against the 400, not the 235 plus the 74.
Correct.
That's okay.
Which I think to David's point, somewhat reflected in these pricings, since they are at least fairly off the shelf panel or examples that y'all chose. That's why the price is more. The form liner, mostly what you're seeing, because a big chunk of that 235 is the labor to hand form it to begin with.
Okay, let's address the scrim on the railing. Who would like to go forward with that? Lynn?
Um, I would just be interested to know if it's possible that, and it would open up other options for whoever was speaking earlier. I don't know what the lady's name is, about having some artist involvement and that sort of thing. It does open up more options and also relates to what Ken was saying, having something that reflects asphalt better than just a off the shelf form liner. So that was my really goal here with using the scrim. Plus, it's a little more unique than the form liner concept. But
Lynn, I just wanted to ask you a question about what you're saying. So the scrim proposal would be just as relevant to the scrim below the parapet wall as on the parapet wall. Are you just proposing that it be mounted on the parapet wall to avoid the issue of the fact that it's trademarked or whatever? Because it doesn't sound like that's a barrier. It just means that we might have to go through them.
no, that wasn't the issue. I was just thinking that if this was not the one that they're showing, might not be feasible in our construction. Dave, maybe you can answer that, but possibly it could be feasible on the safety rail, the parapet wall.
If I understand your question, Lynn, yeah, something like you're looking at there could be bolted to the, what we're calling the parapet wall, right? It's gonna be bolted, but it won't be inset or, right?
Okay, so I think inset would make it a lot more finished looking. I'm not sure. We'd have to see some examples of how it could be bolted and still not look like it's just tacked up there. You know, I want it to look like we intended it to look that way. It was carefully designed that way. But I just think that's something we should leave on the table, at least for the next week, to see if we could come up with some way of avoiding doing an off-the-shelf form liner. I think that's maybe my motivation.
Okay. David, what about as shown there? If we have the scrim below the rail, is that equally feasible?
That is feasible. I believe that's done to the fascia of an AASHTO girder, the type of girders that we are gonna have. So, yeah, that's an option. You just get into the copyright issues or whatever, or sorry, patents. But,
So it is feasible on our concrete girders as designed or as conceived?
yeah, I need to dive a little bit deeper into this, the issue that you get into, and I'm sure somebody has already figured this out. I don't know exactly how that's hung right now, for lack of a better. You know, concrete girders, I'm going to get into technical stuff, but they're post tension. There's a lot of reinforcing in those girders. So I just can't go out there and start drilling in-bed anchors at any place I would like to apply some type of fascia treatment, right? So it would have to be, yes, designed in accordance with the reinforcing in the girder, right? It's taking a second seat to the girder.
Those girders on that project were built with the holes already in them for the mounting brackets for the fascia. So all was figured out in the design, and then the girder was made specifically for it.
You summarized better than I did, Greg. But yeah, it can be designed into the girder, but then the fascia panel has to be designed to wherever the embed anchors can be placed.
And then with respect to a custom form liner, do you have any idea of just ballpark how much extra cost? I mean, we're talking about twice the cost, 3 times the cost, 5 times.
I gave you a range. I'd say double what you have now, because I think you're really in a custom realm right now. I think you might not be feeling the custom because you're seeing a picture of it somewhere else, but I think you're in the custom realm, and you know, I didn't sign in, so I wasn't here, so yeah, I would double what the cost differential was of what you have now,
Okay,
right? Because if you're talking.
So 75 to 150.
Yeah, if you're at $75,000.
Still well
Just
within
assume
the
it's
available budget.
$150,000.
okay.
To attach a panel to the rail.
No, he
No.
asked for a
For the
custom
form
form line.
Custom form liner
True
versus
custom.
current form liner.
Right,
True custom.
if someone
Okay.
draws up
So we-
some,
Right, they design it.
some
and we
intricate, not
execute it.
intricate,
Okay.
a design that meets, you know, that lends itself specific to city of Asheville. Yeah.
And are we talking both sides of the bridge?
Yeah.
Okay, so twice
Yeah.
that, 300,000.
No, the
No,
price
no,
is
no.
for both sides.
So, oh, for both sides, okay, fine. Sorry,
Okay.
thank you.
Mark, I just emailed you, more real life views of those form liners, so we can see the one that seems to be the preferable one, number 5.
Okay, let me get it pulled up.
I think that's important to see because the barrier wall that we're talking about applying has, we'll call it construction and expansion joints. So we'll break up whatever liner they have.
Could you say that again, Dave? I couldn't hear everything.
When it's, you need to pull up the photos of an actual application, and we can talk about it. Be easier. I like pictures. The rendering here does not have them.
No joints on it.
Yeah.
Coming, just slowly.
Okay, so this second one, that 17,946, that's the one that is in our list. So you can see a little bit better what it's going to look like.
Does that look like any of the ones we saw before?
Yes.
Yeah, they are.
I couldn't find an example of that arched one, but I don't think we're considering that at this point, the buttress one.
So the first one is the California Art Deco.
That's right. It's terrible. You can't see what it looks like at that angle, but it's all I could find.
Keep in mind, it's gonna be a lot thinner application.
A lot thinner, you mean shorter?
You're only working with a 42-inch tall surface,
Yeah,
not,
that's
Right,
Yeah.
right.
but
So how many of these modules do you think we'd get on it? Just maybe 2?
This is the pattern that you would get on it, because it's
So
40.
just the single.
We're doing
Okay,
top. This is that's what the rail would look like effectively.
okay.
But that's not that design.
Right. It's a different.
Spatial contraction, expansion. Can you scroll down? Do you have the capability to scroll down and see this blue zigzag?
Oh, I just threw that blue in there just because it was kind of boring without it. I thought Blue Ridge, so just take a look.
That's the one that's only 20 inches.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Do you have the other one that we were looking at, the preferred one at this point?
Lynn was thinking it is this one, but I'm not.
I don't think so.
Yeah, that doesn't,
That's the same number out of the catalog.
How they stacked them.
No,
so we saw, last meeting, we saw it with the flat, diagonal surfaces that made it kind of look like a mountainscape. That's why, what piqued their interest.
yeah, I
I
would.
Yeah, that's. I thought you should see this. I'm assuming because it's the same number, that's the one we're looking at.
I don't think that will work then.
No.
I don't think that anybody's really excited about any of these at this point. Maybe it would be best to table it for now and see if there's more possibilities we could find.
Well, we could, but, I mean, doing a custom does seem to be an option.
Yes.
And we may need to have a backup for, from one of the, one of these form liner designs that we've chosen. We can look some more, but I think we looked pretty extensively and haven't really, these were sort of the ones that we found, but, committee members are welcome to,
Look some more. Lynn, can you put up that slide, or whoever has the slide that had the laser cut metal skirt on it?
Yes. That one, Mike.
Is the
Go ahead.
above the skirt a foam liner? Because I think that would be better than most of the other ones we've looked at. Does anybody know in the industry, guys, if there's something similar to that as a foam liner?
This sort of classical looking
Yeah.
thing.
I think you could find a form liner that represents that. Whether it would look exactly like that, I can't say. This has some other elements where you've got the, at the joints, they've got some kind of buttress column and stuff that would not be part of a form liner.
Right.
I would think that pattern.
There is
Just
a
guessing
pattern,
is probably
there's a
something
pattern
similar.
very similar to that. I don't know which catalog it is, but yeah, it's been,
Something like that does reckon back to the history of Asheville and the age. Also, it won't go out of style like some of the other form liners. Some of them look contemporary suburban, and something like this might look less contemporary suburban.
Mike, I agree in principle. I've looked at some of these form liners that are this kind of classical look, but to me, it's too faux.
Okay, I understand.
It's like the brick is kind of really faux, and
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's one that's kind of similar right there. That
Yeah.
15031.
But yeah, I would agree, Lynn. That's not going to look the same as this picture we're looking at when you get it up there. Not near as
No,
And a lot of the times it looks different too, the longer out it goes versus the shorter area. It changes the.
It certainly seems like something that someone could mock up, with a sample. Somebody could kind of just, I could probably do it in Canva. You could mock it up so that you could see the dimension wise, the span wise,
Yeah.
What it was going to look like, regardless of whether there's a photo out there or not.
Can we go back to 4.6?
which one?
Yeah, the one that you just had, not that one, but the bottom one.
The 42-inch one.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's definitely a triangular solid piece in there.
yeah, that just does not look like what was on
No.
on the bridge.
That's a different.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't.
Why do you not think it looks like it?
Well,
Ed?
for one thing, it's like the bottom triangle is like solid, and it's only the top triangle that is the that's the groove, the sort of, you know.
Right. And I thought about that too. And I thought, well, maybe in this particular application, they're trying to achieve a more intricate or specific design, and they're using this basic 4-6 as the background and adding that solid triangular part as part of the design, because it does, I mean, it coincides with where these two blocks join at the lower apex of those triangles, if you want to call it that. Not apex, reverse apex. But so I thought, well, that's what they've done here, but
Didn't you have the mold up earlier?
hard to say.
Form?
And
Yeah,
and
I
they-
can show it's just a different picture of the form kind of itself.
You had an image that showed the actual mold, that showed the triangular piece, the blank piece
Yeah.
as part of the mold.
About
Can
somebody
Fitzgerald
foresharing up
give
here,
us
give
what
us a-
that looks like
No,
running 50
frequency
feet?
changes.
Do they have that?
They wouldn't get after.
You can
Can
Photoshop.
we take a week and see what kind of sketches we could come up with that are more Ashevillean in nature, and whether or not it's feasible to have a custom form liner?
Yeah, I think it's feasible to have a custom form liner. But yes, we can continue this discussion next week. I would like to suggest that we do have a backup off the shelf form liner. I would go with this one, but we can table that discussion for next week as well.
Seems like there should be a mock-up of some kind so that
Yes, I agree. That's what we need. Some mock-up.
that seems like it would be required in order to make a decision.
And that should be easy enough to do. I mean, can NCDOT or Dave, can your group put that on the side of a bridge so we'll see what it looks like?
That's a question for Mark. Do they think? That's a
Mike's
question
got
for
a
Mark.
comment too.
I don't,
Yeah, Mike has got his hand up and he may be answering the question. I mean, I'm sure it's something we can do. How realistic is it gonna look? I mean, the renderings we produce, I don't even know what system they're using, but I think DOT does not design in a graphic modeling realm to where I know other people that put their own renderings together can do stuff faster and honestly better than what the systems that we're using would.
What about just sending a base layer image back to the company and saying, can you mock up this form liner on this image?
I don't know if suppliers do that or not. We can certainly ask. If that's something they can do. I mean, they're in the business itself, whether that's a service they provide or not.
$150,000.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do a mock-up.
Yes. Yeah, and this is in Orange County. I would think that they would be able to do that pretty easily. And the rendering you're showing right now, I think is by far the best we've seen. I even like the pinstriping at the bottom. I think that's a very clean look that will last in that kind of style as some of the other pieces might.
Yeah, guys, can you hear me okay? Mike, here. I really like this design too. I mean, I think it is kind of timeless and kind of has the Art Deco thing. I'll be happy to mock it up. Mark, can you send me just a typical elevation of side elevation? Do you guys have one?
Yes, I mean, we don't have the PGD yet, but it's close. That's really all they
Okay.
need.
I mean, honestly, yeah, I know we have 27-inch clearance and the girders are what, 84? Is that what they are?
Yes, what I saw.
Okay, so I mean, if we're drawing it like super basic, I can draw a rectangle that has a 27-foot clearance, an 84-inch girder, and then a 42-inch parapet with the embossed on it pretty darn quickly. If that would help out.
That would, thank you.
Yeah, and give me a day to track down, see if I can save you some steps.
If you could give me just a base image, especially if they could send me a WG file, that would make my life so much easier. But I'll be happy to do that for the committee if that helps.
What kind of fun is that? From DG.
Yeah.
DG AutoCAD file.
Yeah, I think there's capability. They're working at MicroStation, which I think is DGM files, but I think they can be. There's some compatibility across the platforms.
Yeah, I think
But
I'm sure I can for that.
Okay.
Yeah, vision, you just gonna export.
Yeah, I'll talk to the team and see where they are and if they've got enough detail, because the design of that bridge it's currently under design. I think they told me the schedule for the preliminary general drawing is July, which is the basic setup, which includes what you're talking about. So I'll see what I can get.
Cool, appreciate it.
Are the brakes the joint directly above the vent? I use the term. Yes.
Only on the second.
Not on the first.
Yeah, where that truck is, there's a joint.
That's a joint. Okay.
And there's one at the end bent.
There'd be a construction
Off-front.
joint.
There'll be a construction joint.
There'd be a cold joint. There'll be a joint. An expansion of the existing construction. But we told them.
Part of the idea is that when you saw that picture from Joe, it was obvious that somebody paid a lot of attention. It was just, they knew where the joints were. They brought down the knee wall. They've got the medallions in there. In other words, that was designed not just, formwork. And I don't know, I think we might want to be going more in that direction than just pick up form. But I don't know. But if you look at that picture, there was design elements in it. Someone paid a lot of attention to how to design a bridge that looks good. And they patented it. So.
Okay. We are going to move on to the next item of unfinished business, which is the underbridge loading. And Mark, I thought that you and Greg had.
We do, Greg. Do you want to cover it? Me try to share, or you want me to try to cover it if I can?
Yeah, if you don't mind sharing, that might be a little bit easier.
You want the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
I can pull up the other stuff I need to. I think I can go with presentation still. Sure.
And he said PowerPoint, but this is not a presentation. This is just an easy way to put together some stuff to show what it looks like. Yeah, so what I'm looking at here, I don't know, I didn't know where this meandering path is going under 26. So I took the liberty of just trying to make some guesses. I did one with a calculation with it adjacent to pad, like it's shown in the plans today, one with it kind of centered between pad and the vertical, and one somewhat adjacent to the vertical. You can see the assumption there of 70-foot mounting height. That may be a little bit low, that may be a little bit high. We can work on that if we need to. And then we committed to 3,000 Kelvin color temperature for official model. So I had to use that color temperature in this picture. All right, you get the next slide. So we talked about light levels last time. Patton Avenue is a principal arterial. So you can see we're 1.6 foot candle and a 4-to-1 average for minimum uniformity ratio. For the MEP, there's a couple of different recommendations. Just depends on what publication you go by. We typically go by AASHTO, and with AASHTO, they recommend 2-foot candle at 3-to-1 uniformity if it's a separate facility. The one that's adjacent to the roadway backs on. And then IES publishes a document called RP8, Recommended Practices 8. And IES, that's the Illuminating Engineering Society. So people know a lot more about lighting than I do. They recommend 1.6 foot candle 30 for pedestrian and vehicular underpasses, where the pedestrian portion is part of it. All right, so next slide. These are just the fixtures I looked at, and don't like get lost on the colors of them. We can take care of colors later on. That's no issue. But the first one's kind of a more contemporary looking fixture, and then we got our traditional wall pack. And then due to the size of this opening here, we wanted to see what we could do with a really high output fixture, a tunnel fixture. I've seen that fixture on the right installed on a couple of different projects, and it puts out an absolute ton of light. Just for example, the highest wattage fixture that they have puts out about 20,000 more than our traditional 45-foot roadway fixtures. Almost double actually for our traditional roadway fixtures. So, all right, here's the next one. So I know this is really hard to see. I don't expect you to read the numbers. There are some PDFs that kind of go along with this that Mark can distribute, where you can zoom in and actually see what the numbers are. But I did a calculation on for Patton Avenue, and then I did a calculation on for those three areas of the EVP that I described, adjacent to Patton and adjacent to the vertical. And then the next couple of slides kind of go over what the results were. So using that contemporary fixture, I looked at what I call a low output fixture. Would have hit what was in our plans for maximum voltage. And then I went with the highest output version of that fixture that they have as well. So the Calzone 1 is the one that's adjacent to Patton, Calzone 2 is the center, Calzone 3 is the vertical, and Patton itself. Don't get too lost in the numbers on Patton here, because this is not like a design system by any means yet. This was just going on what we had done in the preliminary plans, which was three fixtures on the side of Patton. So obviously it doesn't meet the numbers right now, and it may not meet with three fixtures at the end. We may have to add another fixture on either side before everything's said and done. But you can see with that high output fixture, it does pretty decent for the MEP if it's adjacent to Patton or if it's adjacent to that vertical. When you get into the middle there, the numbers are pretty low. And you kind of see that, if you go to the next slide, you'll see that on that traditional fixture as well. The numbers are better. They're a lot stronger adjacent to Patton, adjacent to the vertical indent, even with the low wattage option, but still having some problems getting light into the middle. And then the final slide is what it looks like with that tunnel fixture. And like I said, that thing will throw some light out. So if you did something like that, it would be extremely bright under the bridge. You'd have a tunnel light on the EVP, particularly if it was adjacent to that. So that was kind of all I had as far as calculations to go over. And then I don't know, Mark, if you want to pull up the PDF, we can take a look at it. I kind of explain that a little bit.
The PDFs that show, I tried to zoom in, I still couldn't see the numbers, but yeah, I can pull. I know and Greg, on our end, you're breaking up just a little bit. Did that make sense, basically what he did? I guess we're looking at trying to put together a concept with the fixtures that we typically use that are gonna light the MUP. Some of them picking the three locations is that y'all have talked about maybe meandering its location, so that impacts where all the light, how much lumens that the path gets. And really, we're just looking with this is mounting them on the vent and then the wall. And the idea with, if you don't, I know there was some conversation last time about high lumens and some concern about if you go too high, you create a bright spot and all that. I guess knowing that y'all, I believe, will end up putting some ground mounted pedestal lights to supplement this. I think what we're trying to get to is just a good base starting point. for that, so that it's not too much light that you don't want later. It's hard to change, but since you're adding them to supplement, so this was Greg putting together, kind of the options under those parameters. And one chart for your.
This is 3 fixtures on either side. So, you know, we can add or take away as needed. Well, take away would be hard. We can add as needed.
So if we were to, let's select this system or recommend that you install this kind of a system, how would this work with later on adding the kind of colored LED lights that we're talking about? Is that basically going to wash that out completely, or, I mean, is this not consistent with, or not compatible maybe with what we're thinking about with some kind of LED lights on the bridge?
Yeah, Greg, did you hear the question? If something like this would be compatible with the LED system later, or, which I mean, these could be removed if they weren't. I mean, yeah, you could adjust.
Well, that's true, yeah.
I mean, it'd be good to plan now, but you can adjust if that system, you know, some years down the road, you decide to change it out. Yeah, the power, it's there for these lights, assuming they would power the system that you pick. It's switching some stuff out. But Greg, go ahead if you got a more concrete answer than that.
Yeah, I mean, I think your color changing LEDs are going to be more up in the girders anyway, based on what we looked at for Trade Street in Charlotte. Is that the way you're leaning, or are we talking about trying to aim towards the ground too?
No, I'm just wondering whether or not if you had this kind of this is a pretty bright light.
Yeah.
If you have this underneath the bridge as your standard lighting and it's on, you know, all the time, and then we add these LED lights for color, whether or not basically this is just going to pretty much wash, cancel lights essentially is what I'm looking at. That's all. Yeah.
That last fixture probably, that high output tunnel fixture,
Yeah.
probably would.
I can say this too.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, is that it probably would reduce the effect that we were looking at in adding LED lights. That's all. That's not, you know.
And that one that I had labeled as contemporary, that is a cast down fixture. So it's only going to throw light down. It's not going to throw it up. It's not going to throw it out all that far.
Okay.
So that may be, you may want to lean towards something like that if you're going to go with the color changing.
Yeah.
That was my question, Greg. Isn't it is it 150 feet that we're trying to light between the fence and the abutment?
125, and for that
125,
distance, roughly, the 154 is the other direct.
Okay, so
distance from one side
125
to the other.
feet, trying to do that with wall packs. The wall packs have to throw half that distance or more. That's pretty tricky. It seems like just in itself, seems like you would be forced to use some downward facing surface mounted over the MUP to get a lighting level on the MUP. You're trying to achieve a constant 3-to-1 anyway. If the design you did, are you achieving only 1.9 with those designs? Because that's still very, very dim. That's what I didn't understand. Those you're trying to achieve 1.9 in your design?
I'm trying to, yes.
Okay.
And again, I want to, what I said earlier, this wasn't a true quote unquote design. This was, let's throw some stuff down and see what the numbers look like.
Just for comparison purposes, right?
Yeah. And then we can move stuff around as needed once you get to the design.
My comment is 1.9. I mean, the scariest shopping center parking lot you're going to walk out to your car after closed is lit from 3 to 5. 1.9 is still pretty dark.
Is this 1.9 with bollards or without bollards?
This is without bollard. This is just.
Yeah, so Dave, I think that's the big point there to take away, is that this is just the DOT section of the lighting. This is not the bollards, and so with the bollards at surface level, I think you would be well above 2 and be pretty safe.
Yeah, we don't have any photometrics on those Monticello fixtures, and we don't know. We can adjust the density underneath here. We can add more of them. Right now, they're only at 110.
That will be the committee's recommendation.
Yeah.
That we have.
Yeah,
We have
get a generic 1.9 and then worry about the Monticellos coming in along the path. That's a very good idea.
Do photometrics, so I can drop those fixtures in and see what it does.
Micah, did you do some work on this as well? I
did a super basic level layout. I emailed it to I'm trying to think. Nicole should have it. You should have it. Sonia, Mark, I can forward it to you.
I think I've got
Hold
it.
on one sec. Okay. Yeah, I mean mine's super basic because I didn't have any of the technical stuff, and I'm not a lighting engineer by any means. Greg knows about a million times more than I do, but just kind of based on what we talked about, I counted up the girders and threw those in for the packs, and I didn't put them on the wall on the abutment, but I did put them everywhere else, and yeah, I came up with whatever the plan says, 76 of them, 78, but so it'd be more than the 60. But I did throw in, kind of like a rough MUP path if it were to meander, and then also just some ceiling mounted lights that could either be put in right now as the down lights or future decorative lights. But yeah, if one of you guys wants to share it, I don't know if I can share it from my phone here or not.
I'm getting it. Give me just a second, Mike.
Cool. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, basically, like I said, I did this kind of as a conversation starter. So if you zoom in a little bit, I know it's kind of hard at this level zoomed out, but if you zoom in a little bit, I did wall packs in between the pillars on the outsides, basically facing in towards Patton and also in towards the MUP. And then the idea that I kind of had is that we could supplement that with some uplights on the number of pillars. And that was one question I had for you, Mark, is if you guys know that on the design yet, how many pillars there are going to be holding up the girders. If there's, I assume it's 4. It seems like that's the kind of the going rate.
Yeah, I can check. I don't know offhand unless they do.
Yeah. So anyway, I drew 4 uplights there, assuming there were 4. But if there's 3 pillars, then 3 uplights. But the idea would be that you could uplight from the MUP to kind of get rid of just all the downcast shadow work, and then the kind of bigger, darker dots would be the ceiling mounts shining down. And I kind of staggered them so they could be a little bit creative and also loosely follow the path of the MUP. So, like I said, the only thing I don't have is a wall pack on the abutment side, just because I was kind of curious about how far it would cast back and overall construction. That Greg would know a lot more than that on how far it will throw each direction if we need them on both sides.
Okay, and are these the pole lightings?
No.
Pole lights, there are 4 of them shown. They're right along the MUP. Yeah, they're staggered 1, 2, 3, 4. I did 50-foot spacing basically on them.
Okay, good.
Now, I can take this design that you've got and run it through our photometric software and, assuming where this path is shown, do some calculations directly like you've got this design laid out. I can do it with the pole lights like we're talking about. I have Duke's photometrics, so it's not a problem to drop those in. And then we can look at the different wall pack type options as well. Leave those in and see what numbers with that.
Yeah, I mean, that would be awesome if you don't mind, Greg. I guess the big question on my end, I dropped in that MUP really just as a conversation point, and it doesn't have to be where I drew it by any means. It used to be like right along Patton, and I kind of kicked it into the area slightly, but I'm totally open to anyone's layout ideas. Change anything you want to on here.
And the lights that are shown along the retaining wall, those would light up that wall. So if there's a mural there later on, that lighting is going to light that mural up.
That actually, those 4 are just I label those just as power spots, so they could be future lighting. So that the idea would be they would be lower, kind of shining up, not necessarily shining down. And again, the wall pack might be the one that we also need lights shining down from the top of the wall, down towards the ground. But I don't know that yet. Yeah. So if Greg doesn't mind dropping this in his software, I think that would answer that question very, very quickly.
Okay.
Is there a desire to light the underside of the bridge for any reason?
I think there would be, if it's different colored, if you'll kind of like pan to the left of that page, it shows some uplighting on it. And the idea would be that, yeah, you could just kind of create a little more dynamic lighting rather than everything shining down, which is fine. If you start to mix some lights and do, especially with some different colors shining up, you get the idea of more of a dynamic space, especially if you're engaging the ceiling in this area, kind of like this park is. This park is in Toronto, and they did, you see mirrored tiles, which is, kind of a really cool idea that I think we could kind of run with, further down the road. So that would be the only reason to do uplighting, is to create an effect like this.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Micah.
Sure.
Okay, it is 4:55 now, and we the next thing on our agenda is David's presentation on the city process for public art. I don't know whether we have time for that.
It's fine either way. I know Sonia is the one that generally requested it. So,
Yeah,
I mean, I'm
yeah.
fine talking now. I'm fine talking later. However,
Let's just run a little longer.
whenever.
Well, Sonia had asked and Councilman Tallman had passed
Yeah,
along.
yeah, okay,
And neither of them are here.
Okay, if everybody's fine with running a little past 5?
I think the idea was to do it next week when Sonia.
Yeah,
Okay. Right. The two
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
that were
Oh,
concerned with
Sonia's
it,
gone.
unless she's
Right,
coming back,
okay.
I see her back still.
Right,
Maybe she
yeah.
can have-
Okay,
But
that,
I'm flexible. Let's put it that
that's
way. I'm
good.
flexible. Do it now, next meeting.
Yeah.
However.
I have one question that I'm remembering immediately and one that I might remember later on. In terms of the installation of the timing of the installation of public art, I'm assuming that this bridge is going to be like finished before the entire interstate project is finished and turned over. Will there be a way for public art to be installed after the bridge itself is complete, but before the whole project is complete? Or does it have to wait until the entire project is complete before getting the encroachment agreement to allow the city to do that?
Normally on those, we wait until the project is complete, just so, if we have to go in and do anything, we're not messing up, what the city's trying to do in there. That's normally how we do it. And we can certainly look at, what's needed at the end, but typically we wait for the project to be complete. So there's nothing to interfere with anything the city's wanting to do.
Okay.
Or impacts to it from construction or whatever.
Yeah, right. That's certainly something we can look at when we get to that point.
Do you anticipate like a long lag time between when that bridge is structurally up and the completion of the overall project, or will there be things going on in parallel so that things reach completion pretty much simultaneously?
You know what kind of schedule you guys are looking at?
That's the first bridge we're putting traffic on.
Okay,
So yes, there's a delay
okay,
to the completion of the project.
okay.
Probably as long as a couple years, Ted.
Pardon?
Probably as potentially as long as a couple years.
Okay, but
After
if
the
the
closeout.
bridge is having traffic on it, does it make sense to hold off until the entire project is complete before allowing encroachment by the city?
Well, I think that goes back to what Chris said earlier, is that case by case, we'd be able to look and see. We would just want to make sure that there's nothing construction wise that would go on that would damage any public art that gets put in place until we're actually done.
We wouldn't be doing resurfacing or the final surfacing of Patton until close to the end of the project.
Okay.
So there's activities, you know, there's hundreds of activities tied to what you're asking about. So we'll put traffic on the bridge, but, you know, without looking at the schedule, and I agree with Nathan, it's at least 2 years probably from when traffic's on there to when we'd be final complete. That's just a ballpark guess. But I will tell you, there's a number of items associated with Patton and work along Patton, and when we install, you know, the lighting will get complete. When does MUP go in? When do we do final surfacing? When do we do final striping? Those things we hold off until the end. Or DOT makes us do it twice.
Okay.
Just like mine.
I want, it's important to manage expectations. So as much as we would all like to be as helpful as possible, I think it's better to know that this is 99% sure that the project would be closed before the city could entertain the public art or the remnant parcel activation or anything
I think
like
it'll work
that.
out the best.
Yes.
And that's the same thing we do like with our landscaping. You know, all that happens once the project is over. When that becomes available, that way there's nothing changing and you don't have to, like I said, do anything twice
Right.
on the project.
I think the other comment I would make to that is just that in that time of construction, is really the window of time where some version of this group is meeting, and you know, you've got a good opportunity there to plan and have a full plan in place of what you want so that you're ready to go as soon as that point is reached. You can mobilize in, and the discussions of what art and what it looks like and all those things can go beyond our meetings here and continue in the next 5 years or so that we're actually building
Okay.
the bridge.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so we will return to this at our next meeting, which is it still tentatively June 26th or?
Yeah, we're
Is that
just
then?
wanting to make sure we got a room.
It's scheduled and I secured a room, this
Okay.
room today, so we're good. And if you
Okay.
don't mind, Ted, I've got one quick thing.
Yes.
Okay. Not is just one thing I was gonna bring up. We kind of made some decisions last week, and I know the conversation was about the decisions that are more pressing versus others. The one proposal that's out there as far as the widening of the MUP, that distance to get under this bridge, does have some real design ramifications or hurdles. So with what they're doing currently, that's one of the items that I feel that's still kind of hanging, that we would benefit greatly from going as soon as possible in the committee's direction on.
Are you talking about width and the course? What?
The course under the bridge, not so much, but then today you talked about you might be even meandering in other places. Those have real hurdles to overcome and may not be possible within the current design, because you kind of work from the middle out, road, edge, MUP's here. In the other room, you got, you got utilities and other things that have to come in, and then that establishes a right of way line. We don't have just endless room in a lot of places. Under the bridge, we do, you don't have to decide where it goes under the bridge at this point, but the width part. And it's really between the Bowen Bridge and this bridge that the width is important to know. We're gonna stick with the 14. We're good. We keep moving with the design we've got. If we're gonna go to 18, it changes some other things.
As long as it's not me.
As long as it's not me.
Right. We got an estimate on that, last week or the week before?
Yeah, it's around $275,000.
Pardon?
$275,000.
To go to Florida?
No, it's not to go to Florida.
Okay.
That's only to go. I've got a graphic I can pull up, but it's to go basically just west of this I-26 overpass.
Okay, and that's the city cost.
Yes.
Okay.
It is a city cost?
That's what
The additional width of the MUP.
Okay, additional width.
Right.
Okay, yeah,
Right.
all right, okay.
Right.
All right.
Can we put that up just to see?
Yeah. I've got it in some of this.
There you
Yeah, I'd sent this, I think Ted had some questions. I'd send it to you, Ted, I think, just to
Okay.
kind of establish what those limits were. That's basically what was estimated of the going from 14 foot per plan to 18 foot to accommodate the cycle track striping and an 8 foot pedestrian portion. But even just that 4 foot does kind of
And that
shift
matches
everything.
what's coming off the bridge then, right?
It does. I can pull that typical up. It's not exactly because it doesn't match in total width,
Yeah, okay.
but on the bridge you have 2 4-foot bike lanes. There you have a 4-foot buffer, 2 4-foot bike lanes, and a 4-foot buffer is between that bike lane and the barrier on the bridge, the inside barrier. So basically, you can kind of see it striped, but that hatched area is a 4-foot buffer. Then you have 4-foot bike lane, 4-foot bike lane, one for each direction. You got a 1-foot buffer, and then it's like 8.5 feet minimum. It's variable because the bridge width is variable, but the pedestrian portion is 8 foot at the narrowest. So that's where the 18 foot was decided on, is that accommodates the 2 bike lanes, an 8-foot pedestrian portion, and a 1-foot buffer between them. And there's another buffer thrown in, I'm assuming maybe from the edge of the path to that first bike lane. That's where they can be.
On the Ballon Bridge, that first 4-foot buffer, which is between the bike lanes and the cars, is that where the city's gonna come back in and put in planters, kind of like what the cover of the aesthetics committee book looks like? Is that the plan?
And that's one thing I've seen, the picture, depending on what rendering you look at, the planters are shown in different areas. Most of what I've seen, the planters are shown within the pedestrian portion somewhere.
I was just pinging off the cover of the 2023 report, which had this 4-foot planter separating the bicycle.
And I can pull up that typical of the bridge real quick if it's beneficial.
From the,
Yeah, that'd be great.
from the bikers and the pedestrians.
And quick question on that, Mark, the 14 foot, how is that broken down? I don't have the section in front of me, so I forget what the spaces are for the bike and the ped, if it's just the 14 foot, not the 18.
The 14 is not currently striped or any designation. It's true, just multi-use, 14 feet wide.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I think I read that the Greenway Committee has standards for the striping and the separation, even in a 14-foot.
We don't have any striping standards.
From the Greenway Committee? I read something.
Just do it the old-fashioned way. You don't want it to begin. So specifically, this is what's on the bridge that ties that MEP that's proposed to get wider. And the 18 comes from the 4-4. You either have a 1-foot buffer, you either have a 9-foot pedestrian path, you have another 1-foot buffer, 8-foot pedestrian portion.
And to your question on the planners, those are a later add by the city. We've got a detail for what they look like in the state's package that was approved. But they were lightweight concrete intended to be movable.
Yeah.
So,
Are they in the 4-foot buffer or are they out in the 8-foot pedestrian path?
the document doesn't specify locations. To my recollection, somebody on the committee may remember better than I do, but they're identified as lightweight and movable.
I believe that they can be both, as there's in the wider areas of the pedestrian area, there's intended to be some planters as well as some benches and seating areas. So I believe, Lynn, unless if I'm incorrect, weren't we having some in both places?
I believe that's correct, and that ultimately will be part of the landscape plan, because those planners will be paid for, with the landscape allocation. Uh, Mark, I just want to be clear on what it is that the decision that you need from the committee, on, is it the pathway of the MUP, so that the pole lighting, so that you know where the pole lighting is supposed to go?
So it's primarily, is that MUP getting wider for that distance? Because there's not just automatically room for it to get wider. We have to make room with right of way and utility
Right,
designs.
okay.
Other utility, not the lighting
Okay.
plan.
Okay.
It's got,
So, yeah.
that's the, I guess, what makes it important to decide now.
right,
It's gonna
okay.
cause some redesign
Can this,
and some other issues.
like, when you say now, do you mean this meeting, or can it go to next meeting?
You can go to next meeting
Mhm.
as soon as you can give us an
Yeah.
answer, the better, I
Right,
guess is where
right.
we are
Yeah.
on that.
It's sort of, like, is within the context of the budget that we have to spend, so.
Right.
This is the cover of the aesthetics committee's final report with a picture of the
Yeah.
planters that I think you're talking about.
Or the adjacent to the road, right?
Yeah,
They're in the
right.
4-foot buffer. That was my question.
Yeah.
And I will say, just as a biker and a landscape architect, striping the paths and designating areas between pedestrians and bikes increases safety exponentially on this. And so I would definitely, just as a local person, really encourage the committee to consider widening it if that is a possibility through that section.
Yeah, 4 feet is really tight.
That's going to be a really heavily trafficked area. Like the other parts of the MUP that are kind of running more along the neighborhoods and near Haywood and stuff like that aren't as big of a concern to me. But this section coming right off the Bowen Bridge heading towards Patton is going to be heavily trafficked.
Yeah. You also have to, 4 foot is kind of, you're designing for analog bicycle use, and it doesn't really take into account light mobility. And now and so you're going to have, people are going to need to pass one another.
Mm-hmm.
And 4 feet isn't going to allow for that movement. And
What kind of minimums would be?
Right. And unfortunately, competing for space is that along the bridge, people are going to be wanting to stop and look over the bridge, take pictures, meal about, as opposed to just as a transportation corridor. So I think that there's going to be a more people just loitering and enjoying the bridge and the views than there will be in some of the other locations. So I think the property in that area is going to be at a prime. I had a question about the drawing, the plan that you showed earlier between the Bowen Bridge and the highway. You showed the MUPs parallel to the Patton Avenue. You need to make sure that you show the locations of the 3 monuments so that the MUP is on the other side of that. And that's also important for grading, to make sure that it doesn't, the grading is at least as high as the curb, if not higher, to Patton, so that we don't end up with the monuments having a lower base than the roadway.
We'll look into that, Mike.
Okay.
The desire or what the intent or concept was that those fall between the MUP and the roadway?
Yes.
You got one in the median too, Mike, right?
Right. There's 3 on each side. They should form a kind of a gateway into across the bridge and into the city. I think that was the intent.
Yeah. Okay. It is 5:14 now, so we are going to hopefully nothing more pressing. So we will adjourn, and I'll try to get notes out as soon as possible. And we're meeting June the 26th. Okay, meeting is adjourned at 5:15.